Horror has given us plenty of classic originals over the years. You can think from movies like Halloween, Scream, Saw, pretty much you name it. But the real question is, how do some of these horror sequels compare to some of the other horror sequels that have come out? Well, rock with your boy Tech and we'll find out. What's going on, horror lovers and my beautiful spooky gang? It is your boy Tech. Welcome back to Terror of Tech. And for anybody that's new here, y'all go ahead and subscribe to the kid. We're on the road to 1K subs and we're trying to hit that by the end of the year. So show your boy a little bit of love and go ahead, subscribe, like the video, and go view some of the other content that I got on the channel. But like I said, I hope y'all having a blessed day and y'all talk to me for real. Like, what do you think when you have an amazing horror movie that comes out? It's a horror original. It's a story that is new and creative and it's not based on any other story that you've ever heard. And then when a studio or a director decides to go ahead and make a sequel, how does that usually make you feel? Yeah, because a lot of times we do get a bunch of great movies that expand on the storyline of the original and just all of the greatness that we got the first time. And then there's a lot of movies that are just cash grabs and they were just trying to strike while the iron was hot and the movie is hot ass. Now, given that there are a bunch of horror sequels out there, you now have to decide which side of horror sequels you think is the best. I know a lot of you are familiar with the red pill, blue pill theme. So on the red side, we have classics such as Friday the 13th Part 2, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Child's Play 2, and Evil Dead 2. And on the blue pill side, we have a bunch of newer horror sequels such as The Conjuring 2, Smile 2, Terrifier 2, The Purge and Anarchy. A lot of these are good horror sequels, so it's going to be interesting to see how they match up side for side. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in and see which side is the definitive best side. And y'all comment down below which side you think is the best in terms of these horror sequels. And stick around to the end of the video for question number 2 of my horror Blu-ray giveaway that I'll be doing this December. All right, so let's talk about it. So red pill side, number 1, we have Friday the 13th Part 2. And blue pill side, number 1, we have The Conjuring 2. So let's talk about Friday the 13th Part 2 first. So when it comes to Friday the 13th Part 2, you're coming off the success of the original, where we find that Pamela Voorhees is the killer in the movie, and she essentially is trying to get revenge on all the camp counselors for the drowning of her son, Jason. So we get the first movie that's centered around Jason and, Jason being the main antagonist in this movie. And they did a very good job. Steve Miner as the director, he's a guy that clearly knows his horror. So a lot of these slasher elements that are in this movie, you definitely have noticed in some of the later horror slashers that have come after it. Really creative kills. Having Jason be the villain, I think, was a very good idea because he's now, one of the most popular horror icons really ever. And so you have that, and then you have a great cast of characters from Jenny to Paul to Ted to, just whoever you want to name. Some very good comedic moments. Love the setting of the Packanack Lodge. Just everything about it just seems really campy and just is a very good movie overall and one of the best slashers of all time. So then moving over to a movie like The Conjuring 2, where also coming off the success of the original Conjuring is an amazing movie. So with them coming out with a part 2, going to see this movie when it debuted, this was kind of weird because it was a theatrical experience that I didn't particularly enjoy. I didn't think that the movie was overly scary or anything like that. Where this movie shot up a bunch for me is when I rewatched it at home and I just really locked in. And sometimes theatrical experiences can be bad just due to the people around you. So if some people are, especially if you got a bunch of young kids in there and they're doing all that giggling and all that stuff, how teens are and stuff like that. But yeah, at home, I was really able to lock in and dive in and really pay attention to the intricate details, like having Valak spelled out throughout the film in different areas and things of that nature. It really shot up a bunch of points and made it one of the better horror movies, especially in the 2010s decade. The plot and Ed and Lorraine Warren now going to Enfield to check on this girl and his family who is experiencing supernatural occurrences, and just that whole family and just how dark and gloomy everything is over there, and some of the best scares, especially from a paranormal aspect, and all of horror come from this movie. I think this movie is fantastic. So when you're comparing a movie like this that has such great cast, characters, acting, and score as well, these two movies really match up very well. Obviously, they're completely different, one being a slasher and one being more paranormal. If we're being completely honest, I might ever so slightly give The Conjuring 2 the edge, just because overall, even though the birth of Jason as a horror icon, he still wasn't quite the icon that he became in part 3 solely because of the mask. So people don't really know Jason as Baghead Jason. They know him as the hockey mask killer that, the world has come to know and love. With Jason not necessarily being at his peak yet, and then considering The Conjuring 2 was so good and it really is a 1A, 1B in comparison to its original, I think that The Conjuring 2 ever so slightly gets the edge in this case. Now moving on to the next set, we have Red Pill's Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 versus Blue Pill's Smile 2. So talking about Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, there were some interesting things that they decided to do going with Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. They did keep a lot of things similarly dark as it was in the original, and Freddy is menacing in a lot of aspects, but everybody's familiar with a lot of the gay undertones and things of that nature that come along with the movie. And it's not necessarily that those are things that take away from the movie per se as a standalone movie, but when you think about how the original was, and then how the original was in terms of Freddy being this dream demon and keeping him in that dream world, and then when you bring him into the real world, that's where he's vulnerable. Well, the problem is with this movie, he's in the real world a lot and he still has the same abilities as he would if he was in the dream world. So a little different areas of continuity between that is something that did negatively affect the movie, along with even with Mark Patton as Jesse, he was very solid, and Robert Russler and some of the other cast was perfectly fine, but in comparison to the legacy of Heather Langenkamp as Nancy Thompson, and having the early days of Johnny Depp, and just how good and how creepy and how how the original Nightmare is the best of that whole franchise, honestly, in my opinion. So there are a couple marks that are going to go against Part 2, but I still think Part 2 is a pretty solid movie. So then you have Smile 2, which is honestly one of the best horror movies this year. Sky Riley as a character was, I think, perfect for this movie. Everything that they were looking to do, I feel like they really accomplished in spades, honestly. It was a very scary movie. It very much so makes me proud that they really did this movie right, because anybody who's been a fan of this channel for a while knows that I absolutely love the original Smile, and I had concerns going in whether Smile 2 was actually going to be able to hold a candle to the original Smile, and I didn't want it to be the situation where it's like a cash grab and they didn't really put the same time, effort, and craft into making this a good movie. But by all accounts, they absolutely made a great movie. And honestly, then from this year, not many movies can rival it, and having Smile and Smile 2 as a 1-2 punch, you really can't beat it. So honestly, I think between these two movies, this might be another case where I think Blue Pill beats out the Red Pill side, only because, like I said, even though Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2 is a pretty good movie, I think it's a pretty solid sequel overall, especially for that franchise. When you compare it to a movie like Smile 2, which blew the doors off the box office, I don't think it can really match up. So that is another point going to the blue side. The next matchup is Red Side's Child's Play 2 versus Blue Side's Terrifier 2. The reason why I wanted to match these two up is because I feel like they are relatively similar in a way where plot and story isn't necessarily the main driver of these movies. It's more so about how much you like these individual characters. People who are fans of Chucky have their own little cult, and then the Terrifier people for sure have their own little cult, because they are making that seem like the Terrifier series is just the best thing since sliced bread. So I don't really understand that, but either way, comparing these two movies, Child's Play 2 does a lot of things right, and I think as much as I love the original Child's Play, I think Child's Play 2 is a more fun movie. So still following Andy, he's in the foster care system now, and he's trying to navigate his way through that, and him not having his mom anymore, and obviously Chucky's still following him. Chucky's overall animatronics and some of his dialogue and things of that nature are even better in this movie. Andy's eventual relationship with Kyle, and Kyle being that older sister slash parental figure for him and really looking out for him, especially when it comes to the final act, which was amazing in the toy factory. So all of that stuff is really good. And then in comparison to a movie like Terrifier 2, in Terrifier 2, Art the Clown is on a new killing spree, and he's going after a girl named Sienna and her brother Jonathan. So seeing the back and forth and essentially them having to endure Art the Clown and just avoid him and trying to stop him from terrorizing them and some of their loved ones, it makes for a pretty interesting movie. And I will 100% say that I think Terrifier 2 is much better than the original. To me, it seemed like it had more of a direction of where they were trying to, go, where the quote unquote plot is trying to move. Whereas in the original, it just seemed like you were just watching a bunch of random events from this guy who is going around killing people. That's kind of how it felt. But like I said, this movie felt like it had more of a story plot direction, like it was trying to go somewhere. And another thing that I'll for sure give it credit for is it has one of the most brutal scenes I've ever seen in my life. That bedroom scene and what he did to that girl, that's crazy. So for people who have not seen that, check that out. As long as you can handle guts and blood and just disfigurement of the body, if you can handle that, then I think watching that scene is a plus. But yeah, comparing these movies, honestly, I think overall Child's Play 2 is a better movie, just because of, like I said, even though storyline and plot isn't necessarily the strong points of either one of these movies, in Child's Play 2 is much more likable, and I personally like Chucky much more as a character. I love his lines. They had good comedic moments. Terrifier, Art the Clown doesn't talk at all. He just makes different faces and, does like different little emotes and stuff like that. So little things like that still make him, I guess great in his own right. But in comparison to the legend, Charles Lee Ray, I don't think it quite compares. So I'm taking the red side with this one with Child's Play 2. And lastly, we have red side's Evil Dead 2 versus the blue side's The Purge Anarchy. I know now this comparison is gonna be a little different, especially considering Evil Dead 2 is known as one of the best horror sequels pretty much ever. But to me personally, I am not necessarily the biggest fan of the original two Evil Dead movies. And especially with Evil Dead 2 coming off of Evil Dead 1, there was a tone change. So Evil Dead 1 was attempting to be more serious in tone, and then with Evil Dead 2, there's much more of a comedic approach. Or for a modern example of like that tone switch, I think you can even use the same movies in that franchise. So the Evil Dead remake from 2013 versus Evil Dead Rise, you can really see the tone changes. Evil Dead 2013 was really trying to be serious, and then Evil Dead Rise, you have so many little goofy kiki ass moments. So that's kind of what you get in Evil Dead 2, but I think with Evil Dead 2 is just overall much better, just because one, you have Bruce Campbell as Ash back, and of course he has to have the Necronomicon incantations being read out loud and all this good stuff that summons all of these deadites. And overall it is a good movie, so I don't want it to seem like I'm shitting on Evil Dead 2, because I do recognize it for being a great movie. It's just not necessarily one of my favorite movies. Then you compare that to Blue Side's The Purge Anarchy. The Purge Anarchy 2 did a great job coming off the lack of success, I would say, in a way, of The Purge. And like I've mentioned before, the biggest thing that was wrong with The Purge 1 is not necessarily that it was a bad movie. It's just for it to be the introduction to this franchise and this whole concept and idea of there being a purge, for 12 hours, crime being legal and people being able to do pretty much anything and everything that they want to somebody, and for the movie to end up basically being a home invasion movie, like that's sort of where they went wrong with that. So with The Purge Anarchy, they more so expand on the idea of what the purge is, and it was more so of what we should have gotten in the original movie. So having these group of people out there, trying to survive the night, and having this guy Sergeant Leo and him having his own agenda and we're getting revenge on someone who killed his son in a car accident and all that good stuff. So all of those layers mixed together just made for a very, very, very good movie, especially for that franchise. When I'm comparing the two, I'll say Historically, I understand and respect Evil Dead 2 for what it is and everything that it has provided. If I could only watch one of these two movies, like one of these movies will be erased from, the planet Earth and I'll never get to watch it again, I'd rather erase Evil Dead 2 because I think The Purge Anarchy 1 is a more entertaining movie. And I just overall like the concept of there being a purge and then just seeing how when people are pushed to the limits and, it's survival of the fittest and all this good stuff that comes into play and they execute that in a very good way, it's kind of hard for me to go against it. So The Purge Anarchy is taking this, and so that means that for me, the blue side wins 3-1. So that ends the battle. I think that the blue side is a little more solid than the red side is overall, even though I 100% respect everything that the red side has given us. So just the overall quality of the blue side was kind of hard to beat, especially when you got a banger in there like Smile 2 and The Conjuring 2. I mean, what can you really do? But yeah, Spooky Gang, y'all comment down below what'd you think of me choosing the blue side, and what side would you choose? Like, what are some of your favorite movies out of these ones selected? Subscribe to the channel. We're on the road to 1K subs. We're gonna keep grinding, keep putting these bangers out. Y'all already know the vibes and how we do it, and y'all already know I didn't forget, I have question number 2 for you for the horror Blu-ray giveaway that I'm doing in December for Christmas. So Techie just want to bless y'all and give y'all a nice little Christmas gift or something like that. Just out of appreciation for all the love and support that y'all provide me. It really means the world to me. So with that being said, question number 2. Who is the director of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Y'all drop that down below in the comments as well, along with your thoughts of which side you think would be better in terms of the horror matchup. And that's really all I got. So Spooky Gang, y'all already know the vibes. Y'all stay blessed, and most importantly, y'all stay spooky.